Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this episode of The Federal. My name is Naved Anjum, and I'm joined today by the best selling author, Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. Welcome to this episode of The Federal, Chitra. Thank you so much for making it.
My pleasure, absolutely.
Right. So Chitra has just come out with this beautiful biography of on the early life and courtship and marriage of Sudha and Narayana Murthy, and it's called An Uncommon Love: The Early Life of Sudha and Narayana Murthy, which has just been published by Juggernaut. Now, before we start, probing Chitra about the book and what all it entailed to write a terrific biography of a different kind. In fact, we'll be talking about all of that. Just a brief introduction. I mean, of course, Chitra is somebody very few of us would need any introduction. So she's the best-selling author of. She has written so extensively, variedly that we would keep talking for hours and we would still be scratching the surface. So on that note, Chitra, will just let me just ask you about the biography. Of course, it's a different kind of a biography in the sense that it talks about the relationship. It talks about their values, their ideas and values, and what brought them together in that sense. So I was just curious to know, Chitra, that from the point of view of craft, how did you approach it, in the sense that it's not a very traditional biography, isn't it?
Right. No, it's a very different biography, and you can kind of see it in the cover also, that
Beautiful.
it's a very intimate photo of the two of them, kind of
Yeah.
smiling at each other. It's like they've just had some funny joke that they're sharing, and it is from an actual photograph. So I think this gives the feel of the book, which, as you said absolutely correctly, it's not a cut and dry biography. First of all, it is focused on their early years, and it's really trying to show the kind of people they are. More than what have they achieved in the world, that is also there. But the kind of people they are, the kind of difficulties they went through, the kind of relationship they built, and to show that these two people, they started off as very ordinary human beings from very ordinary middle class backgrounds. And how did they, in following a dream, how did they manage to create this beautiful, Infosys and Infosys Foundation and all of that? I chose to write this biography because it's about a very human couple,
Yeah.
human, flawed, idealistic, yes, but also making mistakes. Sometimes do they have a temper? Yes, they do. Sometimes do they fight? Yes, they do. But how do you, through all of this, keep the relationship alive and keep the dream alive and achieve in the world while try to balance with the family? So that is an endeavor that most of us are involved in. And I felt that people would connect and people would learn something. And it was also a very fun opportunity to show this couple in a very different light. It's
Absolutely.
like inviting them or inviting the reader into their lives, into their living room, as it were.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you of course first met Sudha when she went to meet her brother in when you were doing a PhD at the University of California, and then it was after nearly 4 decades that you were approached by Jagannath to write this biography. So, what was your first sort of thought about when you were asked to do this? Considering you have shared such a long relationship with them, known them for so many years.
Yeah, well, the first thing I said to Juggernaut was, I can't write this book. It's not possible for me to write a book of nonfiction. I've
Right.
always written fiction.
Mm.
That's how I see the world. That's the kind of writer I am. But Chikia Juggernaut was very persuasive, and she kept talking to me, and she had talked to the Murthys, and
Mhm.
they had, because of our long-term connection, from that time when I was a student, as a graduate student, I was certainly not writing anything. And now, I think they also had a degree of trust that I didn't have any agenda other than telling the story and telling it well. And so, that was very helpful. And that really helped me make up my mind. Especially Murthy ji was very positive and he had read my books. He really liked Palace of Illusions. And
Mm.
he said, well, he said it so nicely. He said, if anyone can write our story and bring it to life, Chitra can do it. So after I heard that, I was like, okay, I really have to write this story. And maybe it's time for me to learn how to write a nonfiction book.
Right. And it was a very conscious choice to just focus on the early years and not now like delve into later period of their life. In that sense,
Yeah,
it's a very sharp focus, right?
yes, it was very sharply focused because, first of all, I felt people know a lot more about their later life. And also, I was interested in seeing how is a dream brought to life. Where does it begin, right? What qualities did these people have in the beginning that helped them through the difficult years? So I really wanted to go back and not only back to their lives, but their childhoods, not just their life together, but their childhoods, because our childhoods have such a huge effect on us. You know,
Mm.
the incidents, the values, all of those things. And I really wanted to show that part. And I think they really gave me a lot of wonderful childhood information, which they have never spoken about before. So
Right.
I liked that. And it made me think also that their story is such an Indian story, right? It's a very Indian and middle class story that the grandparents tell you things, the parents give you their values, you grow up with difficulty. And I was particularly touched by all the challenges they had faced early in their lives. And,
Mm.
a lot of people don't know about those things. They only have seen Mr. Murthy, Infosys, Sudhaji, Infosys Foundation. She's a successful writer, but the difficulties that they had
Yeah.
to overcome, and how that shaped their personalities. I think that's
Right.
quite inspiring, especially for readers who may be young, who may have dreams, but who are facing difficulties. I think it will be inspiring for them to say, oh, look, these people did it. And they didn't come from some very fancy background. If they can do it, I can do it too. That's kind of my hope with this book.
Exactly. And reading some of those, early episodes in their life when they were, seeing each other, and you begin with a very interesting fact that it was their love for books, and simplicity, of course. Both of them are simple, um, in the sense that their tastes are very very basic, in the sense that refined,
Very
but
simple, very
yeah,
simple.
very simple in that sense. So that, and their love for books, that's where you begin the biography with. If you could give us a sense of what sort of brought them together. Of course, there was that deep uh, likeness for each other after they first met. But then it was also sort of cemented by the fact that they shared a lot, uh, between them. That they were in more ways than one alike.
Yeah, first of all, they both spoke the same language and they came from Karnataka, although, I didn't realize she came
Right.
from the north, he came from the south. That's like a big deal in Karnataka. So that was fun to find out. But yes, they both were simple people. They were, and they're just very, even now when I went and talked to them, even now they live so simply for
Yeah.
people of their stature and their wealth. They live very, very simply, and they're not like making a statement or putting it on anything like that. That's just what they like. And that's just how it was, when they want to, Mr. Murthy wants to take Sudhaji out for dinner the first time. So she
Yeah.
says, I just want to go to a cafe. No fancy restaurant, nothing. I'm going to the Pune cafe. But I really think in the beginning, their love for books brought them
Mhm.
together because it gave them something to discuss. And from
Yeah.
talking about books, they could start talking about their lives. And so they spent a lot of time talking to each other. In the
Mhm.
evenings, they would go out somewhere or they'd go for a walk and they'd talk to each other. And that is so important because nowadays, with all this social media and the internet and easily available OTT movies, I think we we don't talk to each other that much anymore. So, I hope that as people read this book, they're like, oh, yeah, I could
Yeah.
talk to my significant other or my boyfriend, my girlfriend, and my parents, my siblings. I
Yeah.
could talk to them. That's something they've done throughout their lives. They've
Mhm.
always found some time, except when Murthy was out of country, because at that point, they didn't have
Mhm.
a phone at home, and overseas calls were very important, very expensive, right? So they couldn't talk to each other, and they really missed it. They really felt very cut off from each other, and even then they would, make a little time. Sudhaji didn't even have a phone in her house, but she'd go to the post office and she'd call just to keep in touch. So that communication, I wanted to show that right up front. But there's also like so many fun things, right? They
Yeah.
loved going to the movies. That is another
Mhm.
fun part, that
Yeah.
she loved going to the movies. I think many people know that she would wants to go on the first day, if
Mhm.
possible, at the first show. And he went along just because he wanted to be with her. He's not that fond of movies.
Right.
So I think right from the beginning, we see some compromise. And,
Yeah.
you do what the other person loves. But also, there's
Right.
such funny moments because, they broke some. He was quite mischievous, actually, at
Yeah.
that age.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think it by looking at Mr. Murthy now, but he was quite mischievous. So,
Mm.
Sudha was living in this women's hostel and they had a strict curfew,
Yeah.
and but they wanted to go to the movies and now they're late for the curfew, so they're like, oh my god, I'm going to get into so much trouble. So he thinks of something and he says, don't worry, I have a plan. And then they pick up some pebbles and they throw it at Sudha's next door uh, neighbor's window, and then that person comes to the window and they're like, can you create a commotion so that the guard will go to see what's happening and then I'll slip in. And Mr. Murthy was the mastermind behind this whole plan. So, it's just a whole different side. It's a very charming side, I think, of the couple.
True. True. And then there's this little anecdote about their honeymoon, when they go to honeymoon and they discover that Matheran it was, where they went.
Mathalan.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then after I think just 2 days, they realized that they had seen everything that they had to see, and that what they actually needed, to have a good time was each other. And then they returned, from Mathera to Pune, where he was based out, or was it
Yes, they
Bombay?
were in Pune.
Pune. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, so and that is also a very beautiful thing, that that how to revel in each other's company, to realize that you complement in some sense each other, and
Yeah.
all that you
Yeah.
need is actually each other.
And you
So
don't need so much other
yeah,
than each other. I think,
exactly.
that is something we can all learn, right? In a very simple way, in our own way, we can all learn that just being with people, being with the person you love, that's really what's important.
Right.
Outside things don't matter.
True, true. And also that this kind of mutual love and appreciation for each other, also how it shaped their the career that they eventually went to have, inspiring each other in, in some sense also. If you could talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah,
And
I
we could
think
talk
from
about
the
marriage.
beginning,
Yeah.
sorry, say that again.
No, no, I was saying that we could talk about marriage and parenthood, and how that sort of also changed
Yes.
some. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So early in their marriage, or even before they got married,
Right.
you know, Mr. Murthy starts Softronics, his first venture. It's a
Mhm.
total failure. He has to close shop. But by then they know each other, they're in love with each other. And so Sudhaji, so he feels very let down. He's like, this was my dream to become an entrepreneur, but this company is completely bankrupt. I have to close it down. And she's very supportive through all of that. And she supports him in small ways, right? So, one of the things that they liked to do was go to restaurants, not expensive ones, but just go out to eat. And that was where they would talk to each other. That was their place of talking because she was in the hostel. He is sharing a flat. So, the restaurant, but he can't afford anymore because he doesn't have a company, he doesn't have an income. So she would pay for the money, she'd pay the money for the restaurant, and he would feel bad. Then she would say to him, "Don't worry, I'm writing it all down. I'm keeping track of it. You can return later." But of
Yeah.
course, they get married, she throws that book away. But she had that nice way. She didn't make him feel like, "Oh my God, this woman is paying for me. I feel bad." She said, "It's okay. You return it to me later." And throughout, then, he gets a job with Patni. They move to Bombay, and she's very supportive. She's working for TCS over there, but she's very
Yeah.
supportive all the time. She's working for Telco, very supportive. At night, after a whole day of work, because he had very late night duty,
Mhm.
she would pack their dinner, and she'd go all the way on the train to, quite far where he was living. And then just so that, not living, he was working, but it was like living because he was there from early morning till very late at night. And she'd go there just so that they could eat dinner together, just that companionship. And if anything's bothering him, then he would just share it with her. So she was always the listening ear, always the supporting person, and so forth. And throughout, when he starts Infosys, she's
Mhm.
like, she gives the 10,000 rupees with which the company is started. Then she said something very beautiful to me that when he wanted to try all this, but he was worried. He was like, you know, what are we going to do? And now then they had Akshata, they had their first baby, and now he's like, oh my God, I've become a dad. I have to be more responsible. And she's like, don't worry. You be the acrobat, you be the trapeze artist, and I'll
Mhm.
be your safety net. And I thought that was just such a beautiful way
Yeah.
of saying
Yeah.
something, right? It
Yeah.
shows a lot of love and, you know,
Care
yeah,
about.
it just shows a lot of love, trust, faith,
Yeah.
commitment, commitment.
Commit. Yeah.
And commitment is realizing that every day is not going to be a sunny day. And I think
Yeah.
they surely realized that because those first years were very rocky.
Yeah. And they had to stand for each other through thick and thin, and they did in many ways. Yeah.
And they did. Even if they were fighting, even if they didn't agree. And
Yeah.
Sudhaji is quite open, she's very frank. So if
Mm.
he was doing something and she thought it was a bad idea, she would tell him. But then she would say, okay, now I've told you, now you make the decision. And whatever
Mm.
decision you make, I'll support. And I learned a lot of things about, how to negotiate things in a marriage just from listening to them. I was like,
Mm.
darn, I should have known this 40 years back when I first got married.
Right. And also these little bits about parenthood and how, and especially it could be relevant for, young professionals who marry and then they have a child, and then to negotiate all those terrains and how
Very
they did it.
difficult,
Also very,
very
it,
difficult. And we have to give credit to Sudhaji's parents, her extended family, her parents and her sister Sunanda. They helped so much. So, there's really a very touching part of the book where she's supporting Murthy because, he's trying to start his company. So her job is important, her money is important, and she can't quit, but she can take care of Akshata. She doesn't have good child care, so she has to drop her off at the parents in Hubli. And she's crying, and she was breastfeeding, and her body is in a mess, her mind is in a mess. She won't see her daughter now. I mean, they will try to go and see her every other weekend. Each one of them went every weekend. But still, for a mother to give up like a newborn baby, pretty much, it's very hard. So a lot of sacrifices. And saddest was, Sudhaji was telling me, and I could see that she was still emotional about it. Saddest was that when she would go to see Akshata, Akshata didn't know that she was her mother. She just thought this is a nice lady who comes and plays with me and then goes away again for 2 weeks.
Mm.
So, but she thought Sudha's mom was her mother,
Mm.
right? So,
Right.
on one hand, it's wonderful that there was the family support, but on the other hand, you can understand this
Mm.
young mother, how she was feeling. So, I think the book shows us a lot of those really intimate moments.
Right. And also in part of this story is the story of the startup culture, and how, for instance, Infosys itself came into being, and those bits that in the book also will be very very interesting for entrepreneurs today, that what it entailed in the India of those times,
Oh
the
my
license.
goodness, in the 1970s, oh, the
Yes.
license Raj time.
Yeah.
Oh my, for everything you had to rush to Delhi. You had to go to the
Yeah.
Department of Energy to get a
Mhm.
computer. It took them like over a year to just get the permit for the computer. So
Right.
first they had to get the permit and it took long time, so much bureaucracy. And there was a real feeling, an anti-feeling against people who were entrepreneurs. And,
True.
there was just this sense in the government that, oh, these people, they're no good. They're just out to make a quick profit. They lie, they cheat, whatever. And
Mm.
Mr. Murthy really had to fight through all of that. And Sudhaji went with him, even carrying baby Akshata. They would go together to the Reserve Bank of India. So,
Mhm.
yeah, we've forgotten all of this. We are so quick to forget, right? And
True.
thank God it's not like that right now anymore.
Mm.
But we should respect the people who went through those things and paved the way. Right?
Right.
So after he got all that done with the government of India, then he has to go to the US
Mm.
and he has to persuade them to allow him to export a computer, give him another permit to export a computer, because all kinds
Mm.
of shady deals had been going on with Russia and whatnot.
Mm.
So he went through a lot of things, and again, he did not give up. He get depressed? He got depressed a lot. It
Mhm.
ruined his health. He was so stressed. It really ruined his health. He had terrible stomach problems. He
Mhm.
would just be taking antacids. He had so
Mhm.
much stomach problems that he would just be drinking milk because he just couldn't. He had heartburn all the time from all of the stress.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it really had a bad impact on his health as well.
And also, Chitra, this little bit about when he was before he started, of course, Infosys co-started. Um, this bit about his uh, uh, how he goes to meet Azim Premji for Wipro, and that's also very interesting, episode, because it's a whole different world that he discovers. That he came from a very simple background, but Mr. Azim Premji, he invites him over for lunch or dinner or something of that sort. And if you could talk a little bit about that also.
Oh, yeah. So, his friend from Pune was working in uh, Azimji's company, and he said, look, there's an important position. I think you will be perfect for it because you have so much computer knowledge. And why don't you apply for the job? So he went and he got the interview and he knew all the answers, but he just went in plain shirt and pant. Azimji was dressed in three-piece suit and he took him for lunch to this club. And clearly, it was not a culture fit, right? Or
Mhm.
at least so Azimji thought. And he did not, Murthyji did not get the job. And
Mhm.
then later, Azimji said, oh my gosh, that was my worst mistake that I made at that time. But it shows us how Murthyji has never cared about appearance.
Right.
He goes straight for what is the heart of the matter, how to do a good job. He was always very responsible, but he
Mhm.
was never going to be a fancy person.
Yeah.
Not then. And it's interesting also when Murthyji and Sudhaji get married, they
Mm.
decide, both of them together, that it's going to be a very simple wedding. And the
Mm.
families actually, they want to make a big deal of it, whatever, in their own middle class circles. But they're
Mm.
like, Murthyji is like, he tells his mother, we are going to get married in the house, and
Okay.
we will only invite the number of people who can pay, who can fit in this house. And
Mm.
Sudha and I will pay for our own wedding.
Mm.
So, that's just the kind of people they are. And I'm not making value judgments. I'm not
Yes.
saying that if you have a more lavish lifestyle, it's bad. But for
Mm.
them, that was not what they wanted.
Yeah, it was just a different world, and this is a very key takeaway also, Chitra, in some sense, because this need to stay true to yourself, to who you are, and in the times that we are living in, it's just so crucial to realize where you come from, who you are, and that remains very intrinsic to your identity, isn't it?
Yes, yes. And if your situation changes, your
Mm.
financial situation changes, it
Mm.
doesn't mean that you have to change who you are,
True,
right?
true.
We should have
Yeah.
the strength of character to say, well, this is who I am, this is
Mm.
what you see, and this is what you get.
Yes, yeah,
You
true.
know, these are my values. I will stay true to them. They are good values,
Mm.
and I will do what I think is necessary. Now, did it get him in trouble? Murthyji got into a lot of trouble in a lot of different times.
Mm.
There was a time, and I've written about it in the book, early
Mm.
on. So he and his employer, who used to be his professor, but now is his employer, they have a big client in Calcutta, my city. So they've gone to Calcutta, they've had a very nice meeting with the client, and
Mm.
now they're about to sign this contract, but the client wants to take them to a nice dinner in a five-star hotel. So
Mhm.
Murthyji is walking to the hotel and he sees all these beggars. And remember, in early years, he was very communist leaning,
Yeah.
Murthyji.
Mm.
And so he's like, oh my God, he gives them some money and then he feels really bad. And he goes into the hotel and he tells the client, he says, I can't eat this very expensive meal when so many people are sitting hungry outside. I'm not going to eat. I'm
Mm.
going. And his professor is like, oh my God, you're going to get these people so upset that they'll cancel our deal. But
Right.
he stuck to his values. Did that
Mm.
make things difficult? Yes, it made things difficult for him. Did it annoy people? Yes, it annoyed people, you
Mm.
know. But that's just the kind of person he has been always. Very straight shooting. If it annoys
Mm.
people,
Yeah.
he's just had to deal with that also.
True. True. And this decision to not let Sudhaji be a part of Infosys, in the sense that not let her formally join it,
Yeah.
that was also spoken about, and that was very
Oh my God.
conscious, right?
That was a very conscious, that was probably, I would say, one of the lowest or the riskiest moments of their marriage.
Mm.
Because all this time, Sudhaji is thinking, I'm part of Infosys, right?
Mm.
She's given the 10,000 rupees, all of her savings to start this company, right?
Mm.
She's helped them in so many ways. She's actually written presentations, she's created mathematical models. Murthyji himself admits he wouldn't have gotten their first customer
Yeah.
without her help to prepare him for the interview. And now he's saying, you can't join. And she
Mm.
was all this time thinking, I'm part of Infosys. Now he
Mm.
says, no, if you join, this will become a husband-wife company. I'm very against it. I have had bad experiences in family-run companies. We are going to be more professional. We are not going to be that. And that was the time when she was really hurt. And she said, I did all this for you, and now you are saying this to me.
Mm.
But to give them credit, so for 2, 3 days, they didn't talk to each other, nothing.
Mm. Mm.
And then to give him credit, he comes and he says, listen, I really appreciate what you've done. And he says to her, you are
Mm.
smarter than I am. You're smarter than, all seven of us co-founders. You could run this company. So if
Mm.
that's what you want to do, I will give you this company to run. But
Mm.
I can't be a part of it because I really believe it can't be a husband-wife family-run company.
mm,
So then she's thinking, because, he's not the kind of person who'll say things just to say things. If he says it, he means it.
mm.
So then she's thinking, shall I do this? Shall I do this? Because she's very excited about the company. It means a lot to her.
True. Yeah.
She's been thinking, she's been planning with him behind the scenes all this time. And then she thinks, okay, if I take over Infosys, I can run it. I'm confident. But if he takes over the family and the children, can he take care of it? And then she thought, and she said, oh my gosh, I don't think he can take care of the children. So then she makes the decision that
Mm,
she will let him run Infosys, because by now she has two children. See how a woman is torn apart.
mhm,
She has her professional side, but she
mm.
has her mother's side also. So I think the book brings out a lot of these human
Mm.
moments. And
Right.
so finally, then she says to him, all right, you go run Infosys. I'll be behind the scenes helping, but it'll be your company. And then
Mhm,
she says to herself, okay, I must now think of my life going forward, create my own career. And
mhm.
that's when she gets into teaching. And of
Yeah.
course, then she gets into writing as
Right.
well in some time.
So in your interactions while you were talking to her, and also in the book, perhaps this sense that that she's going to be a writer and that she'll be writing, that was there, at the back of your mind even before she actually, got into it. Like,
Well, she starts writing when, again, she is taking care of the children, actually Rohan. So Rohan is born, Rohan has all these allergies, he cannot take his vaccinations. Therefore, he has to be quarantined in this one room in the parental house. And Sudha's taking care of him. So she can't go anywhere because she can't bring germs back to him. So
mm,
she's really stuck. And but this is the thing that I admired about Sudhaji is when
mm,
she sees that this is what I have to work with, she'll find the best way to work through that problem. So she's like, okay, I'm stuck in this room with this baby. What am I going to do? Baby's sleeping most of the time. What am I going to do? And she says, okay, I'm going to start writing. And
mm,
that's when she really starts writing.
mm,
And that will, again, later she will pick it up. But that's when she writes a couple of books that became big Kannada bestsellers. They were very, very well received, and they show her potential from right there. So,
yeah,
that's
mm,
again something uh, good to look at. That, all right, their lives were not always easy. Look at her. She was like stuck. She was feeling at the very low bottom end of her life and career. She's like, oh my God, years are passing. My youth is passing. I'm not getting anywhere professionally. What am I going to do? But she finds a good solution.
right. Yeah, yeah. And one that also, I think, has given us a good writer who's writing across, in fact, not just for children but also, uh, such fascinating stories. Chitra, another aspect of Mr. Murthy, I think he's recalled in a couple of interviews recently how he sort of traveled ticketless for an 11-hour train journey journey for her. And these are little bit, these little nuggets about the relationship from those days that seem to be uh, so much the point of conversation here in India after the launch of the book. And he also, I think, in one of the interviews said that when he was young and he was spoken about raging hormones, and much to the imagination of Sudhaji.
I know, and Sudhaji is going like this. That's so cute.
Yeah, yeah. So this romantic side of him, I mean, of course, if you could give us a sense of stuff that he did, you know in the early sort of courtship period, when which brought out that side of him.
Yeah, well, you have given a really good example.
Yeah.
Every time when Sudha would go to Hubli, he
Hmm.
would accompany her, and they had to change trains and this, that, and all of those things. And so, Sudha's father was not fond of Murthy.
Yes.
He did not think that this man is a good match for my daughter.
Hmm.
You have to remember, Sudhaji is like, she would come first in the university. She was the first woman to get a job at telco. She's like a path breaker. So the dad is thinking, my daughter is, and she was
Mm.
something special. And here's this guy, no job, no nothing. He says he's a communist. The first time they met, Sudha's dad asks him, "So, what are your plans for the future?" And Mutiji, he doesn't like being questioned like that, right?
Mm.
He's like, who is this man to ask me these things? So he
Mm.
says, I'm going to start a party of my own, political party. And on the side, I will start an orphanage. And so Sudha's dad is like, oh my goodness, how is he going to support a family?
Mm.
And so, so
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing. So he can't go to be with Sudha when she's in Hubli because, he's not welcome at the parental house. But he
Yeah.
will go all the way with her and then he'll come back. And we have
Mm.
to give the whole story of ticketless travel, which I know has been getting a lot of
Yeah.
trolling on the internet.
Yeah.
He would just come to see her off at the station. Then he would get into the train with her. Then when the train, she's like, where train is going? You better get off. He'll be like, no, I want to spend time with you. So no ticket. But Sudhaji always bought, the ticket collector will come. So then Sudhaji would buy his ticket for him.
Right. Right.
So that is
Another.
how it
Yeah.
would happen.
Right. Another of his statement, I think, that which has set the trolls after him, is this this urgency of productivity, that he has spoken about, those working hours. And I wanted to understand from you that it's something that he carries from his younger days when he used to be a workaholic, and in very, very focused on he what he wanted to achieve.
Yeah, this is his value. All right. We may agree with it, we may not agree with it. But
Mm.
it's like when one of my writing students, I
Mm.
teach creative writing at the University of Houston, and my graduate students, they're working with me. They come to me for advice. They're stuck there, whatever they want their a novel to become better. And I will give them the advice that has worked for me, right? That is how we mentor other people. We mentor them by giving them the advice that has proved successful for me. So Mr. Murthy is giving the advice that worked for him.
Yeah.
Now, will it work for everyone? No, probably the advice I give my writing students doesn't work for everyone either. But that's the advice I know to give. That's the advice I believe in, right? So that's what he believes in. And surely, once he got started as an entrepreneur, that is what he did. You know, those early days of fun and games and
Mm.
charming romantic moments in Pune,
Mm.
that stopped. Once he became an entrepreneur, that was gone. In fact, when we were chatting, Sudhajit tells me, if I knew he was going to end up like that, if I'd known at that time, maybe I wouldn't have married him. But
Okay.
I think she was joking. But she did not expect that either. But
Mm.
when it happened, of course, she accepted and she supported. But
Mm.
becoming an entrepreneur really changed Mr. Murthy's personality.
Right.
Before that, he used to love reading so much. That's what brought them together. After
Mm.
he became an entrepreneur, after he started Infosys, he did not read, he told me, he did not read a non-business related book or magazine article for years and years. It was only much, much later when
Mm.
he could relax a little bit that he went back to reading. So I would say that he talks the walk that he has walked.
Yeah.
That is what I would say, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely, Chitra. Chitra, we started with this point about craft, and I would like to conclude with a similar thing from from the perspective of, say, the structure of the story. I mean, it has a very cinematic quality to it, in the sense that you can see it pretty much happening right before your eyes, even if those are these episodes are in a set in a different place and at a different time. You can see all that happening. It's very visceral quality to your prose. And I wanted to understand if sifting through a lot of this material, your conversations, what they shared with you, how did you sort of process all this and to arrive at a narrative which is so well told, in terms of how you craft your sentences. And if you could talk a little bit about that, what sort of a writer's perspective of uh, what writing this story meant for you.
Thank you. That's a great question because I went to Bangalore. I stayed with them for several, quite a few days. I followed them all the time. We'd have a long, day-long conversations. Even we had our meals together. I'd still be recording while people are
Yeah.
eating and talking. So I had so much material. So I had to really figure out what were the key moments.
Mhm.
And then once I knew those key moments, I made them into scenes. So you're very correct in saying that there's a cinematic quality. So I had to visualize the scene, and then I had to put it down on paper in a way so that the reader can also visualize. For instance, there's an early scene early on where he's going to propose marriage to her. And where does he do it? They're coming back in a rickshaw after dinner, and he proposes in the rickshaw itself. And and so there's like, wow, I don't think this has happened before.
Mhm.
So, I wanted to show that moment. What was he feeling? What made him want to propose to her right in that rickshaw, right at that moment? And then
Mhm.
what was their conversation like? And so he says, will you marry me? She says, yes. He says, wow, wonderful. My life is set. She says, not so fast. You got to get my dad's permission. And then there's a whole other chapter about
Right.
all the difficulty of getting the dad's permission.
Right.
So, yes, I saw them as scenes. That moment in the United States where he's gone to work with Don Lyles, who was their first customer. And
Yeah.
Don was very temperamental, very difficult person. And he doesn't give him money to go to a hotel, he puts him in a storeroom to sleep. And I wanted to create that scene. What
Mhm.
was it like for Mr. Murthy to be put over there? What was going through his head? He was thinking about his mother. And I
Mhm.
really wanted to put it in there. That his mother always said the guest is like God. That is something
Yeah.
we believe in our Indian culture.
Atiti
And
Dev.
look at me, right? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Atiti Devo Bhava. And look at me. I'm lying in this storeroom. This man has, a big house with 4 bedrooms.
Mhm.
And here, this is where he's put me. But the thing with Mr. Murthy, and I'll say this is not in the book, but
Mhm.
when I was living with them,
Mhm.
when I came to interview them, Infosys was having, just by chance, its 40th anniversary. So they invited me and my husband to come and be part of the celebration.
Mhm.
And I saw that he had invited Mr. Lyles, Mr. Don Lyles, even after all this. And he had given him a seat right, up front with the VIPs. And I
Mhm.
thought, wow, you know, that shows a lot of forgiveness.
Yeah.
In fact, his family always complains, you're like Gandhi. And then Sudhaji says, don't expect me to be like Kasturba.
Subscribe to the Federal's YouTube page for more news and updates.